Something that is so relevant in our family systems that happens and has huge impacts, but rarely do we talk about it. What I'm talking about here is compassion fatigue or burnout within family members. A lot of times we talk about the symptoms of an illness and not necessarily the causes. For example, if we have a family member who is addicted to alcohol or drugs, that's the symptom, not the cause. The cause is their trauma, it's their mental health disorder, it's whatever pushed them to use an external substance to subdue whatever emotional turmoil or negativity that was going on. Now, we can understand, sure, there's a medical model for addiction or whatever other suffering or mental health dysfunction is going on amongst family members. But time and time again, when we're constantly bailing the person out, being their caregiver, trying to save them from their own habits and behaviors, eventually that well of resources can run dry. Once we become so depleted that we can't handle it anymore, or we start to become ill ourselves, or we simply don't have anything left to give to our suffering loved one, then we have entered the realm of compassion fatigue or burnout. A lack of compassion means we no longer have empathy for their decision making or their circumstance. We start to view the situation they're in as being their own doing. We no longer start to view what's going on with them through a medical model or a biological or physiological lens. However, this is really counterproductive to the person becoming better because the suffering person starts to have their resources, like their family system, withdrawn. They start to feel the disdain and the judgment from their peers and their family members. And this only furthers their negative maladaptive behaviors, like using the substance, like maybe running their health into the ground, withdrawing from other responsibilities and obligations like parental duties or financial duties, and advancing in their career. Because we're human and none of us are born with an infinite sense of compassion, it makes sense that it will get depleted if we don't have the right support. It's so key to prevent the helper from becoming the one who needs help themselves, or the person who's helping the ill person suddenly becomes ill. There are preventative measures. Step one is understanding what compassion fatigue and burnout is. Now, if the caregiver has any type of perfectionistic tendencies, meaning they really kind of define themselves as being a problem solver and the fixer in the family, then if they're faced with this type of conundrum that cannot be fixed by their efforts alone, it can start to feel very depleting on their sense of self and their value and contribution to the family system. Next up, another predictor for compassion fatigue is emotional sensitivity levels. If you tend to be an empath, if you are someone who has high emotional intelligence, this means you've probably picked up on your loved one, for example, your sibling, your child, your parents suffering long before they even knew it was going to worsen. So you're anticipating negative life outcomes before they're happening, which means your suffering tank is already way too full. The other relevant factor here Other relevant factors is sometimes secondary traumatization can occur by seeing your family member in such a delicate and sometimes hard to see state. For example, if their physical health and appearance is deteriorating, if they're getting into physical altercations, if they're having run-ins with the law, if they're getting so inebriated that they're falling unconscious, all of this can cause trauma to the caregiver themselves, which can impact how much bandwidth and tolerance they have going forward to help their loved one. A lot of times it's a cultural component to want to keep suffering private and within the family system, which means there's a delay in getting external supports. Reasons for this can be a fear of judgment, shame in regard to the suffering loved one's condition, but also financial resources are really relevant because a lot of supports are quite costly, and so that's something to factor in. Other unfortunate truth in collectivist cultures, especially the South Asian culture, is extended family members and the general support system will often withdraw their help or sometimes gossip about the situation, which only further alienates the suffering individual and his or her caregivers around them. As individuals slowly start to taper off their support, then the one individual who may be closest to the suffering loved one has less and less respite, less and less breaks, meaning the prolonged caregiving has now led to emotional overload. And once this occurs, often the individual will hit that roadblock of compassion fatigue and burnout and withdraw their support for their lost loved one. Speaking from research-based evidence and from personal anecdote, one strong human emotion is the one of guilt and regret. So before you withdraw your support for your suffering loved one, please do reach out to a physician. If you've already reached out to a physician, reach out to another one, and then another one, reach out to the nurse's hotline. Connect yourself with a mental health practitioner. Oftentimes, these things don't occur in isolation. It's layered, it's intergenerational. And so hindsight is 2020. Don't wait until you have that hindsight to connect the dots and understand what else is factoring in to your suffering loved ones plight and all the things that are factoring in. Hopefully, it doesn't turn into a case of a suffering lost loved one. My message here is to prevent that. If you'd like more information about this, please do not hesitate to contact me via email at contact@therapycovecounseling.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.